Good afternoon, everybody. It's another Friday. It's a hot Friday in Harare, but nonetheless, we were happy the rains were here last week, so it's been great, especially if you're a farmer, you know.
Certainly. Yeah.
Well, Oranga identifies as a farmer. I don't know whether.
No, I don't.
Oh, he's
I
actually-
don't
he's actually
identify as a
so-
farmer. Actually,
I think he
I'm a
ident-
farmer. So obviously, we're beginning to lose hope on this season because obviously most of us I actually I run a rain-fed operation. Obviously, I don't have irrigation, and also the outlook was not good. But I managed to go
Looking
to the farm.
positive.
Yeah, I went to the farm, and it
It's
looks
looking
like
green. Just driving around Zimbabwe, and I must say, to me, December or the rainy season is the best time in Zimbabwe when it's all lush and green. Any thoughts on it?
Yeah, I think I'm indifferent. I think I like the countryside throughout the year. I don't have a particular preference one way or the other.
And you?
yeah, the dryness can be so depressing, especially when you're
Yes.
driving along our roads. So if you do it now, the green, I mean, you just feel some life, even when you're-
Vibrancy, exactly.
Yes,
I
even
feel
if
it.
you are depressed in a way.
It's very helpful.
Yeah, so it is helpful. You need
Yeah,
that.
in line with the green and dry January, we're gonna have some oicha. Do you know what oicha is?
Yeah, Japan. It's I suspect
It's
it's
tea.
Japanese for tea.
Yeah, it's
And
Japanese for
it
tea,
comes
and
in
this
condom
is green
wrappers
tea.
as well.
Are you gonna join us? Or?
Yeah, certainly. I'll try that.
Yeah, I love it, but
Yeah,
you
this is
haven't
my-
had this.
No, I haven't had this year.
So
yeah.
I'm quite keen.
This is my last Friday off the source. So yeah, I'm gonna experiment and
I'm actually quite keen to
participate in this.
hear
Well, yeah,
what you think
I was gonna say the rainy season. One thing that's lovely about it is it produces really great running weather. If you're a runner, like just before the rain or just after the rain, it's fantastic.
Well, I must say you look healthier. Have you been doing a lot of running, or is it the lack of alcohol?
No, it's just it's the running. It's
No, I was just saying that we can now see the whites in Rufaro's eyes.
Yeah, he looks lively. He looks like, I mean, when you look at him now, you actually are surprised that he's actually lively and is full of life, So when he gets too taken by his favorite beverages, sometimes we feel for him, eh? Can you extend this dryness to February and March, Faro?
Can we try?
Can
we
you
try
try
for
that?
February as well? Let's try it.
But this
Can you
looks
humor us?
this
Can you
looks
humor
good on
us?
you.
I'm gonna look at the rest of the
Anyway,
year.
let's ask the viewers.
What
What,
they think.
what do you guys think? What do you prefer? Do you prefer this lucid Rufaro or Rufaro on another level after a drink? I mean, we get a better sense of what the viewers think.
Let's run a poll.
Yeah.
Can we extend, dry January to dry February?
February.
Well,
You can have some.
I don't know.
Are you up for
whether,
it?
I don't know whether that's an experiment I'm going to run. Honestly.
Okay.
But, we'll see.
Yeah. So there's also another thing that happens in January that we would like to discuss. And, the results, the Zimsec and Cambridge A-level and O-level results are out. And as usual, around this time of the year, there are numerous debates that are going on. Is Zimsec better? Is there grade inflation? And I think that we've had very intellectual people who have weighed in this debate, and that's Professor Atam Tambara and your lawyer lecturer, Gwisai, Munyaradzi Gwisai, and both had very contrasting arguments. And if I can put it across, Atam Tambara is arguing that there is grade inflation. So you only get 50 points. You have these scenarios where you have a school that has 56% of the students that have actually set 15 pointers. Over 100 students will have 15 points. Some, as much as 40 points or so. And there is grade inflation. And in reply, Vulnerabilities Gwisai sort of argues that when you went to law school in 1988, you only needed 5 points to get into law school. And today they're turning away people with 15 points. So is there grade inflation, or is just a figment of our imagination?
First of all, I just want to congratulate the students, the one that did very well. It's actually because of their effort that we are actually discussing it here and also in the streets. Those results are fantastic. And you know how depressing it could have been if we were to discuss the fact that there's no one who has got an A. I don't think it was going to be framed as because the exam is watertight and it's so hard. I think someone was going to say maybe the kids are becoming dull, and if maybe the teachers, the school system is not working well. So I want to believe that there's a big effort that's coming from the students themselves and also the teachers and the schools. And I think this big debate is actually coming because of mostly social media, the fact that results are being sort of distributed. You get to see what different schools have actually achieved. But when you look at it from a national point of view, you don't get a sense that the exams are becoming cheaper because people still fail. I've had the misfortune of handling closer to family some of my younger relatives. You see, when you see people getting 30 points, you'd think that pretty much everyone, it has become so easier for everyone. People still flunk. People still get U's or F's or O's if it's for A level. But the ones that are really doing well, they're actually doing much better. So I think the debate should have been around the distribution of these passes, where maybe there's concentration rather, where there's certain schools where there's a concentration of 15-pointers, but that's not surprising. I would argue that it has got a lot to do with the selection processes.
Okay, so I want you to answer this because there are two arguments that are that those who are arguing against, those who are arguing that there is grade inflation. This is the first argument. Is this that when you look at the current color syllabus, it says that when it's Zimsec, 30% is continuous assessment, and the teachers, especially those that where you have schools where you have extremely high marks, they will push their students to get 30 out of 30, right? With Cambridge, color only contributes 20%. And even with that 20%, when you go into an exam, you need to have, for you to get an A, you need to have 80%. That's number one. Number two is there is no way of distinguishing the really good students. So you can't say all the 15 pointers are the same. They're actually not. So Cambridge does something where they have an A star and an A. So you can differentiate between the A. You have a student who gets an A star and you have a student who gets an A. So there's that differentiation. So the argument is with Zimsec, you're lumping the really good ones. So the bad ones, it's true. You lump them all together because they didn't hit the pass mark. But the problem is the really good ones, there's no differentiation anymore. So during our time, for example, somebody who would have had 12 points today, if there's grade inflation, is they can get 15 points. But whoever was getting 15 points during our time is still getting 15 points today. You can't differentiate. Whereas during our time, 20 years ago also, you could actually make that differentiation. What do you say to that?
On the colors particularly, I'm not a big fan of colors, but I've also seen kids who are doing colors. There's a lot of work. I've seen kids in grade 7 that would go all the way to 12 midnight working on something, and it's really the whole project may need to be adjusted, but it actually it's a different way of learning that I think maybe it will be beneficial at the end of the day. And I don't think it explains the big numbers that we're seeing. Yeah,
Okay.
because if you step back maybe like 2-3 years ago, I think we didn't have colors then, but some of these schools like that, the real top mission schools,
They were already
they're posting
outperforming.
this number, but there's no magic there. So they're taking 6 units, which is an equivalent of our 4 units then, and 2 units for the ones that wrote in the 80s. So they're taking 6 units. Those who have got 6 units for Form 1, and for their A level, their cutoff is like 5-6 A's. So what would you expect in a class of say 40 kids? The minimum, everyone has got at least 5 A's. The level of competition is as unbelievable, which is one thing that I think people actually forget. The work ethic, the level of input that's coming from the teachers and the students is much higher at high school than at varsity, which is actually some sort of an anticlimax actually. So where you've got all these kids.
Ranga, you're not answering the question. Question is, how do you differentiate the 15 pointers? Are they all the same? Do you think that
they're all the
syllabus
same? They're all the same.
Has produced these 15 pointers, 56%. Because even you and I are mathematical to a great extent. We know what the normal bell curve is. So when you say 56% of the students are getting 15 points,
But that's not
No, but that's not national.
That's not nationwide.
That's at a school.
That's at a
Okay.
particular school.
That's at a particular school. It's actually a particular. I wouldn't mention. I got some statistics for a certain school like yesterday, and I was surprised by the performance. So you've got this wired in your mind that pretty much everyone is passing. There are schools where they are struggling to get an A,
no, it's
even
not
for
that
Zimsec.
it's. Are you saying that all the 15 pointers in Zimsec they're all the same? Because Cambridge would argue that they're not the same.
They're
They
all
have
the
have
same.
A stars and A.
They are
That's
all the
what
same.
Cambridge would argue.
I don't think there's actually the difference between an A star and an A. If you are to actually do an experiment where you are giving them exams repeatedly, I wouldn't be surprised if there's actually
Major difference.
Yeah,
Okay,
there's
all
a
right.
major difference.
My question. Oh, before we get to the question, what do you think of the tea? But
No, it's really good.
yeah, but yeah. So the thing about Japanese teas, it needs to brew a little longer than our usual.
Oh, so I should keep the tea bag in the
Just
cup?
keep the tea bag in there.
Okay.
It brews
Can I
a
add
little
some water?
longer than
Yeah.
the usual,
Mhm.
but once it's settled, it's beautiful.
It's good to go.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
it's
Fantastic.
beautiful.
Fantastic. So far, so good. though. Yeah.
So my question to you is it a question of perception or is it real that there is great inflation? And if there is a perception, how is the market taking it?
Yeah, so it's an interesting debate, and I read both articles, the Mutambara's article and Gusai's article, and Mutambara seems to be making the case that because there's a school that had 56% of its students get 15 points, that in itself is evidence of great inflation, and
No, he uses that as an example.
yeah, I use that as an example. That's his data point, right?
No, that's not his data point. He looks at the schooling system and he gives us anecdotal evidence. So he talks about he sits on the Rhodes Scholarship,
Yep.
and he's got a student who came out from Zimbabwe, and Oxford did not
Accept
take
him. Yeah.
And they thought, you know what, he needs to do preliminary. And what I want to ask you is it a perception?
Yeah, but so
he's
that's
using
so,
those as anecdotes.
but these are anecdotes. So
Yeah.
so for example, that particular one with Oxford, right? Is Oxford saying that this individual doesn't have the aptitude, or perhaps the nature of their education at that point was not adequate? It's not so much that they don't have the aptitude; it's just that the course that they did perhaps was, by Oxford standards, inadequate, right?
No, what they do is they will rank where your university. So they will rank your university, or they will rank your examination body. So if your examination body is Cambridge or Oxford, they would, or London, they would obviously rank it higher than if your examination body is Zimsec.
Zimsec.
Yeah, that's the reality that we have. Whether it's real or not, That's the
Yeah,
question.
yeah,
I'm
but
posing.
but what I'm saying is, so the question is, look, there are these kids who've got 15 points writing Zimsec exams, right?
You're employing these people.
Yeah,
Do you think
they?
that they're good or not?
Before I answer that question, has there been a separate empirical study of these students with 15 points where they've been tested by Cambridge or Oxford or another more credible institution, and they've been found wanting?
Okay.
You
That's
know,
a good point.
so for, you know, so I'm a bit skeptical about these claims about grade inflation, because I see a lot of anecdotes. I don't see a lot of data.
We could use certain schools. So there's certain schools that were on Zimsec and that have moved to Cambridge, and they've seen a grade deflation. So where you used to get a lot of A graders, a under Zimsec,
Yeah.
when they moved to Cambridge, you see a degradation where it's less and less people getting the 15 points.
Yeah, but okay, so again, that's a function of, we've got to establish whether the cause of that is that there's been grade inflation in Zimsec, or because you were running Zimsec for several years and people were instructed in a certain way and learnt in a certain way, which is different from what is required to excel in Cambridge. When you transition, your grades drop.
Well,
Whereas if, you know, do we have another cohort where they started out just as Cambridge, right, from day one, from Form 1, and they were just doing things the Cambridge way, and you know, perhaps that same group that transitioned from Zimsec to Cambridge and saw a dip in their results, if they had been doing things the Cambridge way from Form 1, perhaps their results would be completely different. We don't know whether the cause is that there's been inflation in the Zimsec system, or that they're actually so different that if you spend Form 1 to Form 4 on Zimsec and then you transition to Cambridge, you might struggle.
The whole idea, especially for universities, is you've got all these examining bodies right across the world. And the idea is any student who writes any examination should more or less be within the normal bell curve. Right?
Yeah,
So when you say, when Oxford or the Ivy League, when they say this is what we're looking for an A star, they're also making the assumption that we actually don't care whether it's Zimsec, Cambridge, or Singapore, or it's Matric, or whatever it is, the equivalent, right? Whether it's London or Cambridge, it should be agnostic.
Yes,
But what they're finding is there's certain schools, right? Because the syllabus are more or less the same, Zimsec and Cambridge. In fact, Zimsec is really it's a local replica of Cambridge, right? And ideally, any student who's done Cambridge and moves to write Zimsec should be more or less the same. They should get more or less the same grade.
I think that theory would hold for sciences, but I think for humanities, the way people are taught and the content that they're taught differs greatly depending on jurisdiction. And so somebody doing a Zimsec history course, somebody doing a Cambridge history course might study completely different content, or the way they're instructed could be completely different, so that if somebody transitions from one to the other, they might struggle. Whereas mathematics is universal, physics is universal, chemistry is universal.
Well, remember Cambridge, even during our time, we were writing Cambridge, but the markers, everything was actually done in Zimbabwe.
Yeah.
So it's just the structure and it's the legitimacy of the institution.
Yes, so I'm saying, so in a subject like history, when Zimsec takes over, or when Zimsec took over, they could decide to do things completely differently from Cambridge. Whereas with mathematics is mathematics. They don't have the option of doing things completely different.
Because I need us to move. I've got
Yeah.
a question directly for you, because I know that Ziva might have a different view, but I want you to start. I'm going to give you the mic for this particular question.
Sure.
South Africa has gone the route where you have a local independent examining body.
Yes, matriculation.
Yes, exactly. Do you think that Zimbabwe we could have a local examining body?
Isn't that what Zimsec says?
It's owned by the state.
Okay.
Yeah, it's not independent.
Also, okay. Yeah, look, I'm not a proponent of government doing anything that the private sector can do better. So, I think, the South African model from that perspective is better than ours.
Yeah, credibility, because I think maybe Zimsec is suffering from credibility. Because you could be right. Is when we do the stats, when we've done everything and we've done this over a longer period of time, it might turn out that actually there is no grade inflation. And what Zimsec was really suffering from was a crisis of credibility. Is it possible that maybe what Zimsec needs is a local competitive examining body?
Credibility is a big issue, and every year the issue is raised. So exams leak, and there are issues that happen before and during the marking that calls into question the credibility of the exam process. And I think that's all that needs to be addressed. I like the fact that you've alluded to the yesteryears where we were writing a Cambridge exam, but the handling of the exam, the marking and etc. was done locally. So I think it was the reason why the leaks were not there that time. Maybe it was because the system was tighter. So we just need to tighten the system. My worry about maybe bringing in a private player is at what cost? It may actually become very costly, especially for so many children that are coming from underprivileged families.
No, but why would you have a problem with it?
No,
if
it's
there's
not.
An independent that's coming in at exactly the same price. So it comes in and it says, you know what Zimsec is suffering from is actually a credibility challenge. And what we're going to do is to charge exactly the same, but we will have greater credibility.
And they don't actually have to charge the same. Like
Yeah,
they can charge whatever they want. But if you want to use this, if you want to use the state one, you use the state one. Right? If you can afford the private one, it's just like with hospitals, right?
We have that already with Cambridge. That's why all ATS schools, the private schools that are coming through, most of them have moved to Cambridge. Because whatever is required, the parents or the guardians of those children are able to fund it. But also we still have to have an option for the kids that cannot afford that. Maybe the issue of credibility, even Zimsec as it is right now, I think that's the kind of demand or that we have to make to the state to say they should make Zimsec more credible. And I actually don't believe that it's easier to. I mean, the exam could actually, the performance is a function of the exam that a kid can write.
Ranga, I wonder.
In that case, I would say let's bring credibility to Zimsec, and then those that have got an option to write other exams from other bodies. They have to. And talking about the South African one, I think 2 weeks ago I saw some story that was saying the board that's running the matric will actually want to get some guidance from here, the way we run our exams.
Okay, you're not going to run away from this one. And I'm going to pose the question again. Why do you have a problem? So we've got Zimsec. Why do you have a problem with a competing examining body that is charging more or less the same, but is giving an alternative to the students?
Why would
you have a problem?
No, I don't have any problem with that.
Why would you not encourage it? Because that's the best way of bringing credibility to Zimsec. The more competition you have, the better Zimsec will behave.
No, I'm saying it's already there.
So schools will then have a choice.
It's already there through
Cambridge is expensive. So Cambridge is really for the trust schools and for those students who can afford it. And you know, it's very expensive. So we get it. The idea of localizing was a good one, was a great one. There was no problem as far as that was concerned. But the idea of just having one examining body, when that examining body loses credibility, you then have a crisis. And I don't think there's a problem in actually having 2 or 3 or many more examining bodies.
I certainly I don't have issues with that. The same way that we have different schools that are structured differently.
So we agree.
On that
could be the cure.
On that score, yes. Yep. As long as you still leave this option available, so that
absolutely.
Not all, every kid has got an opportunity to write an exam if he or she wants. You know.
So it's something that we actually all agree on.
Surprisingly.
Yeah.
Given his
Let's hear what the audience
socialist
think.
leanings.
Let's hear what the audience think. Do you guys think it's a great idea for us to have a competing examining body, local examining body, that is priced more or less where Zimsec is, perhaps even cheaper, but has the credibility and will give Zimsec a run for their money? Please share in your comments section and let's discuss it. Let's get the debate going. So
maybe just sorry to interject. Maybe the other question that we may need to ask ourselves is, what do we do with all these very smart kids? Okay, besides discounting their performance as being a result of grade inflation, let's assume that maybe it's in between. There's some bit of grade inflation, but there's also performance that's really a result of their effort. Maybe what needs to be done to make sure that that level of performance, the work ethic, like the real good ones, the A-star type, so capturing them into the next level. Because my biggest disappointment the first time I stepped in at varsity was the sea change in terms of work ethic. Because I remember in high school, I'd wake up early, starting to read and doing this, and the teachers would just push you harder. You had holiday lessons, you had this extra work. You get to varsity, don't have to do anything. If you are smart, you just, write your notes, write exams. And in fact, the continuous assessment option in varsity, it's worse than color.
Okay, so I can tell you why we're so interested in an examining body and why more and more kids are writing Cambridge. It's because there's no future for them in Zimbabwe. Their future is outside of the borders.
Okay.
So that's why credibility matters. What Zimsec is not realizing is that half their students, and especially the brightest that they're churning out, a lot of them are actually going to end up across our borders.
Okay.
So that's why credibility of the examining body is important. Those that stay in Zimbabwe, that's okay, but they're only doing so for just a period of time, and then they will move across.
No, that's a very important point you're raising.
So that's why credibility for Zimsec is so important.
Okay.
Credibility of our university is also important, what you get, but I think it's less that. I wouldn't worry so much about the universities.
Okay.
I would worry more and more about the examining body. Because if the examining body is fine, then these kids can have a future. But what you don't want is they have a Zimsec examining body. Because remember, even no matter which degree you take across international, they'll still ask, what were your A-levels like? What's the examining body? And if the examining body is Zimsec and Cambridge, employers, universities are going to prefer Cambridge. So what we are saying, and that's why the competition is very important, so that Zimsec can pull up their socks as far as credibility of examinations is concerned.
Okay.
Yeah.
Agreed.
What happens post, I think
Agreed.
that's really up to the university student.
Agreed.
Yeah? Okay.
Yeah, I completely agree.
Agree on that, so we can move on.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so the next one that I actually want you to talk about, and that's something that you have been passionate about for a very long time, is the Zimbabwean dollar.
Yeah.
Tell us where the rate is.
We are
passionate about the Zim dollar.
We are now moving into depressing territory, so it's just a warning to the viewers.
The Zim dollars.
Passion doesn't mean positive. Passion can also mean something that you are highly interested in and that you followed for a very, very long time. We hear, and you can maybe confirm for us, that the rate is now around 15,000, 16,000 a day.
Yeah, that's what I hear as well. I think it's doubled already in the last 30 days.
It started the year at 12,000 or so, right? And we haven't even finished the first month of the year. That's very depressing.
It is.
Ranga's point.
I don't know that it's depressing.
And then we've got the auction rate has also moved.
Yeah.
It was 5.7 by the end of the year, and it started the year, but now the auction is around 8.7, so it's moved, and the margin, the band that the retailers could charge, that has now increased to about 20%. So previously it was 10%. So the official retail is now closer to 11,000.
Yeah.
Yeah. So both have moved, and they've done so in the last 30 days. your comments and thoughts on
Yeah,
that.
look, I think it's a storm in a teacup. If you look at it from the perspective, I think the last official numbers we got from Zimsec, talking to the split in our economy between Zim dollar transactions and US dollar transactions, I think that was September or August last year, and that was 74% USD, 26% Zim dollar, and it's been trending in the direction of the Zim dollar losing market share to the US dollar. And depending on who you talk to, the market share of the Zim dollar is between 10 and 20%, and it's shrinking all the time. So this conversation about what's happening with the exchange rate, if 80-90% of your transactions are in US dollars, who cares? How is this relevant anymore? It's a storm in a teacup.
Okay, so let's look at it critically. So let's assume that the Zim dollar economy is about 20%.
Yeah, okay, that's
It's
substantial. Yeah.
It's a fair enough argument, right? That
Yeah.
the Zim dollar economy is just about 20%.
Sure.
If you think about it, if we say that the economy is about 20 billion, that's 4 billion of your economy is in Zim dollars.
Yeah.
4 billion, if you think about it, an economy that's 4 billion would be, it's a substantial amount.
Yes, it is a
That's what I'm
substantial
saying.
amount. Yeah.
So we can't just say, oh no, because 80% of our economy
Yeah,
is...
but it's shrinking all the time, you see. And when the rate moves like this, what it does is it diminishes.
I think we'll get there.
Yeah.
The first point I wanted is to acknowledge that if 20% of our economy is in Zim dollars, that's 4 billion worth of GDP.
Yeah.
That's a substantial amount,
Sure.
right? Okay. Can we establish that?
No, we were in agreement there.
We're in agreement there, right?
Sure.
So that's why we're analyzing and we're very interested in what's happening there. That's the first question. That's the first point. The second thing that we also need to acknowledge is that Zimra collections are probably 50-50. 50% are actually in Zim dollars. So that's why Zim dollars is still a significant part of our economy, because government's revenue, it turns out, is 50%. So while there is bits of our economy that is 80% US dollars, that is not the case for the largest component or the largest unit of our economy. It's getting 50% of its revenue, or if we are generous, 40% of their revenue is in Zim dollars, right? And only 60% are in US dollars. So that's still a significant amount. So whatever inflation, whatever is happening to the Zim dollar is affecting that. So while you're correct that, over time it dissipates and it becomes negligible, that's true, but as
We're not there yet.
we're not yet there, and as we sit, it's still a big, significant component of our economy. So the question I want you to tell us is, where is the Zim dollar going? Where is the rate going?
Yeah, look, the rate is a function of how the issuer behaves. If the issuer creates more Zim dollars than is justified by productivity in the Zim dollar portion of the economy, then the rate is going to go. And unfortunately, the issuer is not very open and transparent about how they create Zim dollars. In other markets, you get very good data from the issue of the currency in terms of what they're going to do over the next 6-12 months in terms of spending, in terms of money supply growth and that sort of thing. Here we are told the same thing all the time. The Zim dollar has a great future. It's going to be stable. It's going to do wonderful things.
That's an excellent intervention from Rivara. Given this context, and we see the rate running in the first 30 days, that doesn't bode well for us.
It doesn't, but it also speaks to how, or this is speculation, but I would say it speaks to how Treasury has been managing its finances. So we have always known that there's so many outstanding invoices, some probably dating as far back as maybe 6 months or so, that had not been settled as government was trying to manage the rate. And obviously, as we got to January, start of the year, governments still has to spend some more, and I think they could only do that by first making good to some of the service providers. So I think the biggest problem that we actually have is this whole thing about where we've got an economy that has become 80. In fact, I spoke to a banker recently who actually say the deposits and loans, they are now 90% USDs. So it's actually has moved away from the 80. So you then ask, is it not better to have a structure where if it's 90-10 in terms of business activity, even revenue, ZIMRA revenue collection must also reflect that. But it's also a function of the policies, because you know sometimes a day or two before QPDs, before payments, they can just announce that we want all payments to be strictly in Zim dollars as a way of propping it up. So it just tells you what we should expect. It's pretty much what we have seen even last year, where they will allow it or inject some money. It causes this commotion. Maybe a week or two from now, they try to close the tap. But
to
it's
run
not
after the saboteurs.
Yes, and it's always like that, because they know that we've given money to this guy, and you actually allocated some people that are following every movement that you make.
There's another undercurrent I want you to address. That so this could be an oversupply of Zim dollars, or could it also be an undersupply of US dollars? That the underlying economy is actually not giving us as much US dollars as it did same period last year.
Yeah, there's that. But I think when it comes to the US dollars, the supply, trying to measure it, I actually think is the supply side is, we can never have enough, especially when we've got confidence issues. Because the demand is not driven by economic activity, economic needs in terms of maybe someone wants to import for production or things like that. We have got people don't trust, they don't want this, they don't have confidence in the Zim dollar. So the moment someone gets hold of a Zim dollar, they are looking to getting rid of it.
Yeah.
So to the extent that we keep getting these Zim dollars,
so if I assume that is true 5 years ago and is true today, but the difference is 5 years ago, the number of exports, the supply of US dollar was
probably much higher
than now. It means that the rate must move.
Exactly.
So it could be maybe government has not necessarily, we don't know because we don't have the numbers. The last numbers we have is as of August last year. So we don't know what the money supply numbers are. But it could be that they have printed, but not any more than they did exactly the same time as last year. But it's just that this time around, the number of US dollars that are in the market has reduced. Even a 10% or 20% reduction in the number of US dollars in the economy is actually quite substantial.
Yeah, it is. And also because of the history and the trauma. So whatever amount of Zim dollars that any player gets will just cause them to panic. So you're trying to pay, if you can pay someone, which is what we've seen even in business, where someone has got an option to pay either USDs or Zim dollars, they just pay you in Zim dollars at an official rate, so much different from what you get on the apparel
Thanks,
market.
Ranga, for that. And I think that is what I want you to give us a prognosis. And the prognosis is, I don't want you to think of yourself as Rufaro. We know exactly what you would ask for. But suppose you were Mtuli, suppose you were Treasury, and you're confronted by these facts. What would you do? And put their mindset, not what Rufaro would do.
Well, like, I don't know how to, I don't know.
Well, you've seen this movie so many times.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what do you think they would do?
Look, I think if you actually listen to what they say and read their statements, you know, they are all for the continuation of the Zim dollar as an important part of the economy. So if it was up to them, or if they got their wishes rather, the market share of the Zim dollar in our economy would actually be growing every month until it got to 100%, and you know, we stopped using foreign currency completely. But unfortunately, you know, the irony of where we are is that the policy action that they've taken to promote the Zim dollar has actually had the opposite effect. It's actually undermined the credibility of the Zim dollar, and has actually, nobody has done more to reduce the market share of the Zim dollar.
You're thinking that Rufaro. I don't want you to give us a Rufaro answer. Shumba, I don't want you to give a Rufaro answer. I want you to give Mtuli. Suppose it was Mtuli that was sitting there. What would he say? What would the new governor, because we are going to have
no, look, they would say what they've.
What do you think they will say?
They will say what they've always said.
Exactly.
That the Zim dollar has a bright future. That it's going to, that they are taking action to ensure the stability of the Zim dollar, to deal with high inflation, that the inflation is actually of the Zim dollar is actually going to come off, and that going forward they're going to restore the market's faith and confidence in the Zim dollar. This is what they've said time. Yeah.
Okay, so I'm gonna add something to this and just make this a little complex, because I think that they're gonna make the system even more complex than it is, than it has been over the last 4 years. And I want to hear your response as a market analyst. So first is they're making Nostro very vulnerable. So everything that they've done, everything that Rufaro has said, makes Nostro very vulnerable, because the more and more we say what we're saying, and the more and more they continue on this path, there is Nostro that they can now raid. That becomes extremely vulnerable. What's actually in our Nostro? What is real US dollars and what is not? So that becomes very vulnerable. That's number one. Number two would be a midway where they mix Nostro and the Zim dollar. So they will acknowledge that the Zim dollar is gone, that we actually have three currencies. We have US dollar cash, we have Nostro, and we have Zim dollar. Okay, Zim dollar is gone, but we're going to give you a mix, right? A mix of Zim dollar and Nostro.
Okay.
But it will taper the inflation on the Zim dollar, and then this new mix will still be inflationary, still go through the inflationary road, but not as much as when it's pure Zim dollar. And how they will do it, how they will introduce it, is when they're paying out contractors and they're paying out
like they wanted to do with Zig.
Exactly.
Yeah, look, if it would be unfortunate if you were to go through that path, because right now, much as the Nostro is not one-to-one to the actual US dollar, it has got some value that if it was to be maintained, it was going to be good in terms of being able to oil the economic engine. But definitely those fears are there, that I wouldn't use the word raid. We've seen that before with FCAs being raided. But I think for now what will happen is it will be sort of a subtle depreciation, which is caused by them sort of adulterating the
expansion of the Nostro money reserve base.
Exactly. So when they start, we've already seen that maybe. So they're issuing TBs in USDs, and obviously there's a lot of skepticism in terms of whether on maturity those TBs are going to be paid off. And if they
become discounted,
yes,
and by discounting, they're increasing, they're actually inflating the Nostro balances.
Exactly.
But those Nostro balances are not backed by
any real US or economic activity. So that then becomes the main worry. But I think I don't know if, I think for the businesses and individuals, it's something that I've seen before. So I don't think there's anyone who believes that Nostro is safe, who believes that Nostro is equivalent to actual USDs. It has got value right now, but if it keeps losing value, I think it will take us much faster time to get to a point where it's a proper Zim dollar.
Zim dollar, yeah.
Yeah.
So
It's said. I think that's why, to a certain extent, maybe keeping the Zim dollar there will be helpful, because they'll try to do their gymnastics with the Zim dollars and possibly spare the Nostro. Because once the Zim dollar is gone, Nostro becomes Zim dollar, like proper, and then they'll start doing whatever they want.
So the paradox, the two-headed snake. Sorry.
That's rather dramatic. My gosh.
But anyway, I'm having fun. So
You're not depressed. Oh, you're enjoying seeing some other people getting depressed.
No, I think it's a new year, new attitude.
Yep.
There are more things to worry about than this. We've seen this numerous times. So
We've watched this movie before. We know
yeah,
how it ends.
we know exactly how it ends.
And sometimes it creates opportunities. If
Yeah,
you want,
yeah,
if you want to look
absolutely.
at it on a brighter side.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So anyway, the paradox I wanted to speak about is the financial services system.
Yep.
So while what Ranga has said is true, so you could, as a financial services or even as business, you could just separate your accounts. You could have where you're trading in real US dollars and you're trading in Nostro. Now the paradox is this: as long as the financial services is there and you require money from the financial services, they're the ones who are going to create the Nostros, right? So that's how it ends up with manufacturers and business, right? Because we've seen that our exports, real US dollars, they're going to dwindle.
Because of lower commodity prices?
Lower commodity prices, just global economy, everything that's happening, we're already starting to see. So that's going to dwindle. But the reality is you still need bank financing, for example, if you're a manufacturer. And then the manufacturer will get bank financing from the bank. And the bank will start pushing this Nostro very aggressively. Right? So sometimes it's not necessarily that it's government that's pushing the Nostro expansion. It could actually be the banks that are now pushing Nostro expansion.
Yeah, but I think when the banks do it, the banks are for profit and privately held for the most part. So I think they will, they will manage it much better than the state.
Well, last time they didn't. That's the problem.
Maybe they've learned. What
I don't know
They've
about
learned
that.
a
Is that.
lesson.
Is that actually a fact?
Yeah.
Some banks failed, but I think a lot of banks actually managed their affairs.
Well, the
admirably.
point is everybody's US dollars in 2016 then became RTGS.
But that's not the bank's fault.
No, it was the bank's fault because the banks were the ones who were buying these TBs.
No.
Yeah. So
I
what
beg
I've
to
seen,
differ.
what I've seen with banks.
And let's hear those arguments.
Yeah, what I've seen with banks recently is they are alive to all those issues. So basically, what some banks, if not most of them, are doing is they've actually separated Nostro from real US dollars. And you'd find that they actually are going out there looking for lines of credit. So to the extent that they've got good exporting clients that can actually earn raw dollars, they are funding them mostly with lines of credit. And then they are ring fencing those cash flows where, create some sort of, whether it's a singing fund or something that is attached to whenever this particular client is exporting and they're receiving raw dollars, those are the dollars that are coming to service this specific.
So what you're actually saying is they're actually creating the problem.
I don't think they are,
Because
if
according
they can,
to our laws, according to our rules, the country's laws, there's no separation.
yes.
So what are they going to do? Suppose you're correct that a bank has separated the two. It's saying, you know what, these are real US dollars and these are not real US dollars.
They are Nostro, yes.
They're Nostro. Right? What is it going to do when government or when the RBZ directs them to make a certain payment and it's US dollars?
I don't know about government,
And
but
if even the regulator raids those US dollars.
I don't know about government, but I know certainly that if it's a private player who wants to make a payment, banks are not making payments offshore against Nostros easily. they are happy to do that using, to the extent that you are funded with proper dollars. So I think there's some attempt by banks to try and manage the whole.
I think he's being overly politically correct. The simple thing is, if a bank receives a receipt from the state of Nostro US dollars that is actually not backed by cash or real US dollars, and the state says, look, make this payment, the bank is just going to have an honest conversation and say, how do you want me to make this payment? Where are the US dollars?
And I'm saying that's actually...
And that's what's happening.
And that's what's creating the problem. Then Nostro, because the minute the banks separate, it means that Nostro has to have a rate.
Yeah, but I want to push back
rate.
on this narrative a little bit and give the state a little bit of credit here, because for all of last year, really, I don't think that the discount on Nostro has been more than 5%. So it's been steady, and I think that's a function of discipline on the part of the state in terms of not diluting the value of US dollar Nostros. And I think they understand that if they behave the way they behave with Zim dollars, with US dollar Nostro balances, that's the end of banking and finance in this country, because nobody's ever going to actually...
Okay, so Rufaro, please. Suppose you were to go to Botswana.
Yeah.
Right. So maybe if we're agnostic, we can actually be very honest. You go to Botswana and you walk into a bank, and the bank told you that we have... This is not official.
Mm-hmm.
This is not the banking laws, but we have separate accounts that are US dollar, and we have another that is Nostro.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think? The minute someone tells you that, what does it mean?
It means they're two. Yeah, it means they're two currencies.
They're
basically.
two currencies.
Yeah.
So no matter what we say, if the banks are not front running, but if the banks have gone ahead and have started making the separations,
yeah,
it's only a matter of time when the Nostro will just be inflated. It's only a matter of time, because nobody's going to accept it. If you go to Botswana, are you going to accept the real US dollar or the Nostro?
No, everybody's going to prefer the real US dollar.
And what are you going to do when you're making your Zimra payments?
Obviously, if you have
you're going to use your Nostro. Mm-hmm. You're not going to use your US dollar. So if everyone is pumping back Nostro to government, what do you think is going to happen with government? Soon enough, it's only a matter of time before government. Because if we were saying 60% of what government is receiving is Nostro, right? And then it turns out in March that actually,
mm-hmm,
of that 60%, maybe 30% is real US dollars, but the other 30% you can't transfer.
Yeah, no. I hear the point that you're making, and the logic is, your logic is flawless. All I'm pointing out, mm-hmm, is that if we actually look at the data in the market over the last year, right? If you look at all of 2023, in as much as what you're saying is true, that discount rate for Nostros has held firm, right? So, and that's not because the default setting of Zimbabweans is to have faith and confidence in banking. It's because actually the state has been disciplined about Nostros.
It's nothing to do with the state. It's said that there was no separation.
No. The separation has been there for most of last year. It's not a new thing.
Okay.
Yeah, because you see, the reason why it's there really is because the bank wants to be in a position to say, look, I've received this credit and it's not backed by anything. So if there's a delay in making a foreign payment, or if there's a challenge, they can actually have an honest conversation with the person who gave them those Nostros to say, look, guys, there is no cash backing this up. There is no, so, and I think it's a very responsible and reasonable thing for the banks to be doing, to be able.
Yeah, no, it is. But
they ought to be able to defend themselves.
I think it quickens the crisis.
No, it actually forces discipline on the part of the state, because if you could mix the two, right, and you couldn't tell them apart, right, then you could just create Nostros and inject them into the system, and you wouldn't be able to tell where the problem is coming from. Right, but if you actually separate this money that's backed by notes and money that's backed by actual Nostro offshore from money that may have been created, right? Then you can't come up with it's an economic saboteur or.
All right. So then the question I have for both of you is, how then do you differentiate money created by banks?
Yeah. So if it's
So suppose a bank gives me a loan.
Yeah.
It gives me a Nostro loan.
Yeah.
It's not giving me US dollars.
Yes.
Can I do an international transfer with the money that the bank is giving me?
So when the bank writes credit, they're going to have a conversation with the borrower, right? Mm-hmm. Why do you need this facility? What is your plan, right? That's part of the process of actually writing credit. Mm-hmm. So, and I believe that if in your credit application you indicated that you actually need to make offshore payments, right? You need to import equipment, or you need to pay for a foreign service or whatever. It would be really foolish of them to then give you the facility and then fail to make that payment, right? So I think to the extent that, I believe to the extent that banks are actually writing loans to corporates and individuals who need to make offshore payments, they actually have the capacity to make the offshore payment.
That's the first one. How about how about a corporate that then withdraws US dollar cash? So there's a 10,000 limit a day. So you give me a credit as a bank, and effectively what you're giving me is Nostro, right? As a bank. So, and then I go to your ATM or I go into a bank unit and I start withdrawing 10,000 every day.
No. So it used to be true so many years ago, but not now. Banks are actually quite smart. So if you have got Nostros, they actually... So they give you some sort of a leeway as an individual, right? Mm-hmm. So depending on the bank, the amount of money that you can actually withdraw. But you find that those ones that have got raw dollars, actually, it's almost limitless. So you'd find that
So they're creating Nostro, which is backed by real US dollars.
No.
So if you deposit notes into your account, if you deposit 100,000 into your account and you want to withdraw 100,000, you're not going to have any challenges.
No. That we've covered. Yeah. But what we're talking about, where the bank gives a client credit, and they say, okay, we've given you a Nostro loan.
Yeah, but you've had that conversation, right? Why do you need this money?
No.
Right?
Are you saying that I'm prohibited from withdrawing
I'm not saying
cash?
They actually limit you.
But the limit is different from, because the limit is 10,000.
So the reason why they limit you, in fact, the limit may actually not be 10,000 as it were. Mm-hmm. So the banks actually say, if your US dollar balance is offshore funded or it's cash, you are fine.
No.
Yeah,
guys,
okay.
We're talking about where the bank gives you credit.
When they give you credit, you can't withdraw US dollars willy-nilly, no.
Unless that's what you agreed, because they've given you credit, right?
Okay, guys, it's a very simple, straightforward question.
No.
Which you haven't answered.
You make it look like a bank can advance me 100,000 and then I'm at liberty to start withdrawing it as cash. No.
Can I?
No, you can't. You can't.
Unless you agreed upfront with the bank that's what you need the cash, the loan
is
for.
It possible? Is it possible or is it not?
I don't know.
Okay,
I'm not.
I think we don't know.
Yeah.
Can we push this question to the bankers? Please let us know. If an individual, so if a civil servant gets a loan from a bank, right? Can they withdraw cash? If an individual gets a loan from a bank, can they withdraw cash? That's the first question. Whether there's a limit or not is a secondary question. But the first question we must ask is, can they withdraw cash? Right? And then we can have a conversation after that. Is that fine?
No, I think it's fair.
Yeah, that's a good question.
I think it's fair.
That's a good enough question.
But just to say, banks have not been irresponsible.
No one is saying they're irresponsible.
Banks have actually been if you want to make an offshore payment, and they give you a loan, because like what Rufaro says, you are telling them what you want to do. They actually tell you that, okay, fine, we are funding you using this line, so it can be mostly a line of credit, which is proper US dollars. and from you they require you won't settle that account using Nostros. They actually want.
You're answering your own question. That's not my question.
No. I'm trying to clarify the point that you
please answer this. And it's a very simple, straightforward. Guys, if we don't have the answer, it's fine. We don't have the answer. But let's put it out there.
Let's put it to the bankers.
Let's put it to the bankers.
We'll hear from them.
We'll hear from the bankers. And the question is very simple and straightforward. If you give out a loan in US dollar to an individual, can that individual withdraw cash, whether it's an ATM or make an offshore transfer? That's all we want, right?
Or whether the loan is Nostro or the loan is proper US dollars.
Yes, exactly. Please just answer that.
Okay.
And we can move forward, because then we can have a proper economic analysis.
Okay, that's fine. I think
on the impact of that.
If
Let's end there.
My suggestion was to bring a banger. It's not like I want to make a
we can do that
yes.
next time.
Yeah.
So we can
bring a banger.
But we don't want to get them into trouble.
So the problem is
we don't want to get any bank into trouble. So that's why they can anonymously give us the answer. And the answer to the question that we are asking is a very simple, straightforward one. If an individual or company asks for a Nostro loan, can they withdraw cash? Simple, straightforward. Let's move forward.
Since we are live, if you can even send me a WhatsApp message right now, and we can settle this issue.
No, I don't want us to settle it now. Let's settle it next week.
Okay.
And we move on. All right, let's move on. Let's talk about the U.S. embassy, or somebody within the U.S. department, the diplomatic corps in Zimbabwe.
Yep.
Came out and on Voice of America, I believe, and she sort of said that as far as they're concerned, any negotiations or any participation of the Americans in the debt arrears clearances program for Zimbabwe, they've put a pause to it.
Yeah.
So the question I have for you is, we then got a response from the state, through its mouthpiece, which is the Herald, and there was an entire article, over 1,000 words, and the real critical thing that came out was the state is not happy with that response, and that they will go it alone. They will not pay anything, and they will go it alone. So that could have just been the Herald playing politics or propaganda. That could not be necessarily coming straight from the government. We don't know. But certainly there was a response that the Herald felt necessary to put out that statement. And as economic analysts, we must talk about it. So the question I have for you is, what does it mean if the Americans are putting a pause to this? And a lot of the multilateral organizations are really US backed.
Well, they, even if they're not US backed, the US wields tremendous power and influence in a lot of multilateral institutions, be it the IMF, the World Bank, the Paris Club. So it's obviously, in terms of our capacity to restructure our debt and raise money in global capital markets, having the US say, look, we're not going to participate, is a negative, which is going to make it that much harder to restructure or raise any capital. And so that's definitely a dark cloud in terms of banking and finance at a national level for us.
Ranga, what are your thoughts? Do we have a siege mentality? Well, certainly from the Herald, the Americans have said, we've put a pause. We're not participating in this. And the Herald has sort of said, well, we don't care. And yet the government, Treasury, does care about this process. Because if we're unable to sort out our debt problem with the farmers, with our multilateral organizations, and to clear our arrears, then we have a big problem as a country. We're in a debt trap. We're literally in a debt trap.
On a matter like this, obviously, I wouldn't listen to the Herald.
Okay.
Yeah, I'd rather listen more to the Minister of Finance, the people who really matter when it comes to monetary issues. And we know that there have been attempts to try and resume the debt arrears clearance negotiations. So obviously,
But the Americans have said we put a pause.
yes. So it's
So where to from here?
it's a difficult one. It takes us back to where we have been, generally treated as a pariah when it comes to in the debt and in the international capital markets. And it's not surprising because if you look at, remember the Adesina project that we were discussing, there were those three pillars that had to be dealt with: economic, the paying of the farmers, and also governance issues.
Yeah.
And I think we failed in pretty much on all of them.
All three.
Yeah, because we haven't paid.
So what does it bode for Zimbabwe in the next 5 years or 10 years?
It just means that we will be firefighting. We won't be able to access the international capital markets again. And it also means that even projects that ordinarily have to be funded from international capital markets, for example, of infrastructure nature, which ordinarily would have to get funding from there, will continue to try to fund them locally. And you know what it means in terms of the rate, the depreciation in the currency, and things like that. Am I hopeful that something can be done?
What could we do with friendlier countries? Could China, Belarus, could we get more credit from them? What could we do to you?
Sure, it's business. It's not about friend. Look,
So I've always made the case that people read too much into the politics of money, of debt, raising capital, and that sort of thing. And my favorite example for this is Russia. Okay, so this is a country that's at war. It's got the entire Western world sanctioning it, right? And yet the Russian ruble has performed better than the Zim dollar. They still have they're still able to trade on the global stage with countries that will trade with them, and they don't have a problem paying their bills, right? Because they have financial discipline, right? So the our challenge is whether what people want to speak to sanctions or whether this new development with the Americans saying, look, we're not going to participate in Zimbabwe's debt restructuring. If we were serious about our finances and started paying creditors and could demonstrate that if you lend us a bunch of money, whether it's $1 billion or $5 billion at a lucrative interest rate, we would actually pay you back, whoever you are, whether you're the Chinese, the Indians, or Buccaneer Capital.
Okay, I would like to push back at this. When you look at Russia going wrong, it only did so after 20 years of economic growth, right? So they knew, or they could pick a particular time when Putin could decide, you know what, I think I can afford to be wrong. And he had gone for 20 years where the economy was growing. He was building reserves. If you look at 1998, they had zero reserves.
They were broke.
They were broke.
Yeah.
But 20 years later, they have 2 years cover, import cover, right? The economy 20 years ago,
It was a shambles.
it was in shambles. It has grown by 10 times, right? So they're in a far better position to fight back,
Yeah.
right? And if this thing continues for another 20 years, I don't think the same argument would prevail. Whereas Zim, we've been in a crisis now for over 20 years.
Yeah.
So we don't have that luxury. We don't have those resources. We don't
No,
have.
but
So even if we were disciplined, unfortunately, we are coming from 20 years or 23 years of a crisis. So our discipline is useless.
I beg to differ. I think so. So I mean, let's look at 2023 and talk about those numbers a little bit. How much did the state collect in?
Let's
revenue?
call it $4 billion.
Right. Now, I'm saying if the state decided, look, you know what, we are going to batten down the hatches, we're going to cut costs, we're going to be disciplined, they could decide that they're not going to spend more than $3 billion a year and have $1 billion to make payments and to show good faith and that they're serious about paying off debts and being a reliable and credible debtor. And I think there would be capital that we would be, if we just, even for 6 months, if we showed that level of seriousness, right? And we said, hey, okay, we want to raise money on the global stage, we'll pay 12% USDs, we're looking for a few $1 billion, that money would come through. But we actually need to show that discipline.
I'll give you the last word, Ranga. And what I want you to contextualize is, even if we were to cut expenditure, it comes at a political cost. It means that from Vudza, all the political programs have to go. You have to cut the civil service by half. Russia doesn't need to do that. Could you see a possibility of us cutting expenditure by 50% or more?
No. I'm actually seeing a possibility of us increasing our expenditure. We don't have that luxury. We are coming from all those years of economic turmoil, so we don't have the luxury of cutting expenditure. If anything, you would expect that the policy is actually expansionary, trying to grow the economy as well. So I think for us the situation is quite different. We actually would want to have the backing of international capital providers, which is something that has been lacking for the longest time. So our best bet, which we have so far failed, was to try and at least stick to the 3 points that
clearance.
It actually come up with.
I was going to give you the final word, but I think I'm the anchor.
Yeah,
so
you being you.
You're going to bully the producers.
Exactly.
Bully the producers.
No, maybe I'll tell the crew to just cut him, to cut the mic off.
Okay, just give me one minute. I think the point that we're trying to make is cutting expenditures is just going to be very difficult for many reasons. But because we've been in a crisis for the last 23 years, our best bet is debt clearance and debt forgiveness. Because if we get a 70% like Nigeria, Ghana got, if we get 70% debt forgiveness, it just gives us a new platform in which we can get credit, but with the necessary financial discipline, and then we can become somewhat stronger like Russia. So the thing is, we only have one route out of this crisis, and it's the Sina Chisano route. That's the only way. If we don't resolve that, then we're in a perpetual crisis. And it's very possible. We've seen it with Argentina, Venezuela. You can have 100 years of a crisis. We've only just gone through 23 years.
Not 30 or 40.
No, to be fair, I would say 23 years. Gentlemen, it's been wonderful, as always. This is great. Let's continue the conversation. Please continue to like, subscribe, and comment, and share. Otherwise, have yourself a wonderful weekend. We certainly are. Cheers.